Victoria 3 is a socioeconomic simulator made by Paradox Studios that lets you experience the life and suffering of a 19th century statesman. A good friend of mine introduced me to the game in the same way a friend introduces you to meth. I tried it for free out of curiosity and walked away with 2 months of my life gone, a new expensive habit, and an intrinsic knowledge of Victorian-era geopolitics and Keynesian economics. There's a complex game, but once you get the hang of it, you'll see there's nothing quite like it. Discover 0% interest loans as Spain and reconquer Spanish America. Give everyone rights, except the Hungarians. Get the British addicted to opium, before it was cool. Become the man you always wanted to be. A Croatian ethno-nationalist child president. Let's get started. First and foremost, Victoria 3 is a game about making the numbers go up. The 2 most important numbers are the GDP and tax revenue. The higher your GDP, the higher the taxes. The way you increase the GDP is by constructing buildings. In order to do that, you need construction. Each country starts with a free amount of construction, which is dependent on its GDP. In order to get more, you have to build construction sectors. Each building in Victoria 3 requires an input good to produce something and employs workers to make said something. Farms need fertilizer and farmers, barracks needs guns and soldiers, and construction sectors needs wood and tools and laborers. If you construct a building and your market does not have sufficient goods the building requires, you'll create a market shortage. Market shortages give a reduction to the affected building's output, or in simple terms, it makes the building not work as good. You resolve this by either letting the free market take its course and importing from the world market, or, preferably, supply the goods yourself. Alternatively, you can avoid a situation altogether by choosing to be proactive in setting up the production of the required goods beforehand. Let's take a look at our construction sector here. I see that the construction sector takes iron and tools. I do not have that, so I will build a logging camp and a tool workshop in preparation. One problem. Currently, there is no demand for tools or iron in the glorious Japanese market, so these buildings will not employ, which means they will not produce the goods. Get around this unpleasantness by subsidizing the buildings. When a building is subsidized, they will employ regardless of the current market demands. Consequently, they will also not be making any moolah because they're essentially government employees. Solution? Make the demand yourself. Here, we'll apply an economic strategy called a construction loop. It goes a little something like this. Step 1. You make a construction sector so you can construct buildings. That construction sector requires goods. Step 2. You use the construction sector that you just built to make the buildings which will provide the construction sector with the goods it needs to work properly. Step 3. Repeat steps 1 and 2. Some might call this propping up the GDP. I call this the Shogun's New Deal. But when does the loop stop? When urban buildings start making money. Let me explain. In Victoria 3, there are 3 kinds of buildings: developmental, rural, and urban. Rural buildings produce raw goods such as wood, wheat, ore, and fish, while urban use these goods to make manufactured products like furniture, clothes, and tanks. The rule of thumb is, if a rural building makes around 1k profit, you build it. If an urban building makes around 2k profit, you build it. And urban buildings become profitable when our pops have found gainful employment and want to experience the bliss of consumerism. Father. POPs, no, not your POPs, stands for POPs. Is short for populations. People are real, and people consume goods. At the start of the game, most POPs will be subsistence farmers. That means they don't purchase a lot of goods and they don't pay a lot of tax on the account of having no bank account. This is rectified via the aforementioned construction loop. The purpose of the loop isn't to cook the GDP figures, rather it's to begin the process of industrialization and get your POPs to stop farming vegetables and get real jobs. The more money a single POP has, the more its standard of living increases. The greater the SOL, the greater the need for quantity and variety of goods. For example, at the start, the average Spanish laborer subsists on fish, wheat, and opium to dull the pain of living in Spain in the 19th century. Once his SOL improves after getting employed in the government-owned iron mine, his needs now additionally include furniture. So now there's a demand for furniture, and because there's a demand for furniture, there's demand for wood and tools needed to make said furniture, which means the need for more tools, which means the need for more wood, demand and supply, ergo profit. Your job as the omnipotent spirit of your glorious nation is to create the demand and build the supply. However, this gets increasingly more expensive, and eventually the cost of the construction sectors will start outpacing the income gained from SOL increases. We need a hand. An invisible hand acting as a metaphor for self-interested people with a keen business acumen, ruthless drive for self-profit, and commodification of basic goods. That's right, we need capitalists. But how do you get a capitalist? By privatizing government-owned buildings. Buildings in this game have ownership. If you, the state, make a building, then the building is government-owned, and the government itself directly gets dividends from it. But those dividends diminish quickly. Like the miracle on the Han River, the solution is to let other people get rich first, so they can invest in the economy and do our job for us through the private construction queue. There are 2 types of construction queues. Government, which constructs buildings requested by us and is paid for by the taxpayer, and private queue that autonomously constructs buildings and is completely free. Meaning, we get to sit back, relax, and build up our treasury while the private sector constructs highly profitable buildings, giving us even more money. But what to do with all this money? You build more construction sectors. If this number is being taken up with the private queue, you don't have enough construction sectors. So build more, they build more, you get more money, easy. On a completely unrelated note, are you familiar with the concept of boom and bust cycles? The theory goes that capitalism has alternating cycles. A boom cycle, where private investment is at an all-time high, jobs are plentiful, and wages are competitive. Following this comes a bust cycle, where the investment money runs out, private construction slows, and job opportunities become limited and wages become stagnant. And you'll never guess whose private investment pool just drained up. What does that mean? It means you shouldn't have built all those construction sectors. Because now you can't afford to utilize all the construction without sending the country into bankruptcy, and stopping all constructions is not an option. Why? Because your GDP is cratering. Remember that whole spiel about supply and demand? Yeah, well, the demand just stopped. Suddenly, those logging camps and tooling workshops aren't selling as much of their goods as they used to, which means they're no longer profitable, causing downsizing and layoffs, leading to radicalism and less tax revenue because apparently people with no jobs can't pay taxes. Speaking of, let's look at the budget tab. Here you can control government and military wages, what goods are taxed, and adjust the general tax level. Now remember, we're faced with a recession, an increasingly radicalized population, and an unmaintainable government deficit. There are two types of government deficit, red and white. White means that if you stopped all government construction, you'd have a positive balance. Red means that you wouldn't. But a red balance is not necessarily the end of the world, as long as you build your way out of it. Each country has a certain amount of debt it can accumulate before going bankrupt, which is partly dependent on your GDP size. In theory, if the GDP were to increase fast enough, there's a chance we could outrun bankruptcy and get back in the green. The trick is to react immediately, because with great debt comes great interest rates. And we got a lot of debt here. Will you A. Construct highly profitable buildings, simultaneously enriching and employing the populace while indirectly increasing the tax revenue? Or B. Raise taxes and cut government and military wages? If you answered B, congratulations, you're eligible to be a member of the British government. When hovering over high taxes, you might have noticed some tooltips about legitimacy and radicals from political movements. In general, pops fall under one of three categories. Loyalists, which are people who are happy with the current regime and will support it, neutrals who don't swing one way or the other, or radicals who want change, any change, irrespective of what that change is. Spoiler, it includes you, a rope, and a balcony. Also some law changes. Laws are passed with the help of interest groups, or IGs for short. The greater the IG's cloud, the bigger the chance of the law passing, and same goes for the stall chance. In previous patches, this made passing laws a game of RNG for the most part, but with the release of patch 1.12, I am pleased to say this is no longer the case. Now you can negotiate with the opposing interest groups and even get neutral groups to support your law if you're willing to do them a favor. Additionally, now there's a chance to add law amendments which range from whatever to really fucking good. Most countries will start with the landowners and church being the most powerful, with the groups like the petty bourgeoisie and the trade unions being marginalized. Because in 1835 the middle class hasn't been invented yet and workers only had the right to shut up and work. Each interest group has specific ideologies and agendas. Trade unions want workers' rights, and rural folk hate everything that isn't dirt-related, like passing free trade. Because apparently they think that feeding the nation entitles them to an opinion instead of dying of black lung at the ripe old age of 19 like God intended. Regardless, trying to pass free trade makes them upset and drops their approval rating, which may lead to suboptimal situations. Current laws, loyalists, radicals, and random events will all influence the approval of an interest group. Depending on how happy or unhappy an IG is with the current state of affairs, they provide appropriate modifiers for both occasions. For example, happy industrialists will invest more, while unhappy industrialists will commit tax fraud. Thank God they haven't figured out those are mutually exclusive. Think of government approval as a currency. Each time you try to pass a law, some groups will support it and you'll gain approval, while others will oppose it and lose their approval. If an IG with enough clout has a very low opinion, they will attempt a coup, or worse, support a revolution. Coups are easy enough to manage and usually involve exiling a general or two to the East Indies. Revolutions are a bit more complicated. Revolutions can get traction just by themselves, provided there's enough radicals, but angry interest groups will also happily support them. However, movements aren't necessarily bad. Political movements also give you an increased chance to pass their supported laws, and if a movement pressures a certain interest group enough, you can put the supporting agitator in charge. This is also the only way you have of affecting who leads your interest groups. After a leader steps down, it's up to RNG to choose what ideology the next leader will have. While you have no control over who gets to be in charge, you do have ways of handling uncooperative leaders. As mentioned, you may replace them with a more agreeable agitator, exile them, or give them the Stalin treatment. This way you can manage unhappy interest groups if passing their preferred laws is undesirable or in absence of good random events. If these options prove insufficient, you can always go with the tried and true method of starting a war, also known as appeasing lobbies. A political lobby is a coalition of interest groups that advocate a certain stance towards a foreign country. For example, you can have a pro-British lobby, an anti-British lobby, or both at the same time. The way you appease lobbies is by engaging in diplomacy. Diplomacy? In my capitalist simulator? More likely than you think. You conduct diplomacy through treaties, which you can fill up with a plethora of articles. And by plethora, I mean 6. Foreign investment rights, trade privileges, power block embassy, military assistance, guaranteed independence, and transfer money. Most of the time, whatever you want can be gained with the aforementioned 6 articles, and sometimes an obligation if you're short on cash. But sometimes this doesn't work, like when the British refuse to transfer an enclave because the Queen thinks it's funny to watch the Congolese starve to death. In such cases, we resort to barter-based diplomacy. Give me your stuff, or I'll kill you. But before we can engage in military adventurism, we need an army, and that means we need money. I already gave you a rundown of the construction loop, but just to recap, do this until your urban buildings start making money. When you complete the loop and start building urban buildings, you might notice a problem. Buildings aren't employing due to missing qualifications. Recall those illiterate peasants? Well, taking a peasant and putting him in an iron mine makes him a laborer. You know what don't make him? Literate. Literacy is a deceptively important number. It affects research and qualifications, with the latter determining where pops can get employment. Unlike everything else in the game, there's no fast way to make people suddenly literate. It's a decades-long process that needs to be started as soon as humanly possible. Start by passing public schools and later compulsory primary education and get those ignorant little bastards out the factory floor into schools. Little Tim needs to learn basic fucking arithmetic so he can work in a government administration and file tax audits. Speaking of, let's talk about bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is one of the most versatile resources in the game. Basically, if you're in a bureaucracy deficit, you collect increasingly less taxes. You get bureaucracy by building government administrations. They are cheap to build but expensive to upkeep, especially in the early game. It's not the wages that get you, it's the paper. So by building more government administrations, you might end up losing more money than if you haven't built any at all. To avoid this, it's best to only build a few at a time and concentrate them in one state until you max out the throughput bonus. Outside taxation, bureaucracy is used for incorporation, generals, and leveling up institutions like education, which grants you more innovation. Innovation determines how fast you can research technologies. You get innovation by building universities, which generate innovation until you hit your innovation cap. The innovation cap is determined by your literacy, which is why you want to start raising it early. Each nation starts off with a different set of research technologies, and priority for research is dictated by the country's current situation. Regardless, I recommend going for pharmaceuticals first if possible. Why? Because nothing in life is certain but death and taxes, and dead people can't pay taxes or create values for the shareholders. Therefore, death is fiscally irresponsible. Pharmaceuticals unlock the public healthcare law, which reduces mortality up to 25%. If you have a power block, I highly recommend grabbing the level 2 food standardization principle for an additional 10% mortality reduction. Oh, power blocks, almost forgot. When you rank up enough on the world stage, you'll get the ability to form a power block. Power blocks are, de jure, representation of internal organizations, associations, and empires. De facto, a scheme to expand your market. There are 5 options to pick from and only 2 good ones: Trade League and Saran Empire, with the latter being the best one, because you can make your power block members into subjects for free. This is fantastic because A. As subjects, they enter into your market. B. If reduced to puppet status, they pay you money as tribute. C. They can do diplomatic plays. D. They automatically join any wars you participate in. And E. You can command your subjects to change their laws. So, Sovereign Empire gives you the benefits of all the other power blocks with no downsides. They're supposed to be balanced by the fact that you take a 90% hit to your cohesion when you subjugate a block member. Usually, this would be devastating because cohesion determines how fast you generate mandates, leverage, and how likely someone is to join your power block. The thing is, if everyone is your subject, they don't get an opinion, and the more subjects you have, the faster you build up cohesion. As for the principles, there are many, but the undisputed must-have one is companies for that additional company slot. Companies are by far the best and funnest part of the game. They make so much fucking money and are instrumental in growing the economy. Remember, if it nets you a profit, it is an objectively good and justifiable thing to do. First and foremost, company buildings. These are buildings that a company can own and build. You want to pick the companies that have the most profitable buildings and they don't overlap with established companies. Naturally, these are going to be mostly construction-related buildings like coal mines and tooling workshops. Additional buildings can be granted with company charters, of which you have a limited amount of. Ideally, you want to pick companies that come with many buildings, except if the prosperity bonus is really good. These are self-explanatory and frankly don't really matter all that much, except for one. Generic Tools Workshop, which gives you a 5% manufacturing throughput, and it even gives you a prestige good. Prestige goods are special variants of regular goods that give extra bonuses to buildings that use them. They're good to have, but same as with prosperity bonuses, they're not the main objective. Companies are unlocked by owning specific states or having a certain number of buildings or some other special conditions, like building the Panama Canal. Word of warning, if you're going for a canal company, make sure you don't give any other company trade rights. Real quick, trade rights give the company rights to build trade centers. Trade centers are free money because they enable you to import and export goods to the world market. You build trade centers by selecting them in the construction tab, sorting by trade potential, and if the trade capacity is 0 or negative, you build it. This is important because canal companies have bottom-of-the-bin gutter trash buildings that will never ever be profitable, so they need trade centers to compensate. Besides that, the bonuses are quite nice. As Adam Smith used to say, first you grow the GDP, then you get the taxes, then you increase government spending, and then you get the women. Suffrage. If you've been following along and not doing whatever the fuck passed for entertainment in Wisconsin, you should understand the first part. The second part is quite simple actually. For taxes, you want whatever law gives you the most money. Usually this will be per capita and proportional taxation, while graduate taxation is really good for late game. For economic laws, you want either interventionism or laissez-faire if you don't want to interact with the construction tab. Other laws are pretty self-explanatory or have already been addressed, so I leave them up to your discretion. Except guild system. If you have this, you need to get rid of it at all costs because minus 30% qualifications is quite fucking bad for the job market.
Don't ever let them see you coming. That's the gaff, my friend.
As mentioned, certain interest groups support certain laws and oppose others, and citizenship laws are no exception. What I did not mention is that base IG ideologies get overridden by the current leader. For example, the petite bourgeoisie, like all North Italian small business owners, are inherently racist and believe South Italians should sit at the back of the bus. But if, say, somehow the exiled emperor of the United States, Joshua Norn, a renowned inline royalist, should somehow get in power, they'll support multiculturalism wholeheartedly. Because racism does not pay. No, literally, it does not pay. Depending on the country's primary cultures and citizenship laws, non-primary cultures will experience a certain degree of acceptance. The less accepted they are, the less they'll get paid, amongst other less important things. This is obviously horrifying because how will they purchase my fine china if they're not getting fair compensation? Same principle can be applied to slavery. Now, the Nestle shareholders among you may think that having a limitless source of free labor would do wonders for the economy, but riddle me this. How the fuck is a slave gonna pay taxes? They're not, because slavery is a blight that prevents decent hardworking folk from paying taxes and engaging in consumerism. And that is unacceptable.
All of this just works.
Pop quiz, what to do with all this disposable income? Build government buildings, of course. First off, universities. You want to stack as many of them in your capital as your throw output bonus will allow, and then later a couple in every incorporated state. This will top you off in your innovation and give you sweet qualifications. Second, administration is to repair any deficits at max out institutions. And third, barracks and naval bases. But first, imperialism. The defining characteristic of the 19th century. Now, what is imperialism than a more direct means to expand your market and grow the economy? The question is, what places are prime for surprise industrialization? Iron, wood, and coal make up the bulk of your economic dietary needs. Most countries start with these resources, but if you lack them, you can find them using the goods potential lens. These three will be your bread and butter until you unlock cars. Cars are insanely profitable. So much so that in the late game, your construction will consist of automobile factories and resources needed for said factories, primarily rubber and oil. Let me make this perfectly clear. There's no such thing as too much oil or too much rubber. You need every last drop of rubber and oil in your market. And it would appear that somebody left a continent full of resources just lying around. That's right, it's time for colonization. You pass a law, pick a state, and start colonizing. While we wait for that to finish, let's invade the Middle East. It's one of the better locations for early conquest because it's 1856 and as far as the rest of the world is concerned, it's a pile of sand populated by 50 people, knock yourself out. And the infamy costs are quite reasonable. Oh boy, it's time to talk about infamy. Infamy is the thing that prevents you from having too much fun. Each diplomatic demand carries an infamy cost, and depending on the amount of infamy you occurred, you fit into one of the 4 brackets. Much like tax brackets, all of these serve to make the game a little less fun, unless you have so much infamy that consequences no longer apply to you. The more infamy you have, the less countries will be inclined to agree to treaties, and your subject will become increasingly rebellious. Now, this all sounds very reasonable. You can't go around invading random countries and expect everyone to like you. The problem is the values are not tweaked very well. Cleaning up colonial borders can very easily get you up to 50 infamy, because apparently conquering British Zanzibar is on par with annexing the Papal States. I could complain more, but let me complain about the second-grade mathematical problem they call a war system instead. It is often said that war is a numbers game. Victoria 3 takes this completely literally, as wars are not decided by maneuvers or luck, but rather by the number above the front. If the number is green, you are winning. If it's red, add more men until it isn't. Sure, your military tech plays a role, but as long as you're not sending peasants against siege artillery, you'll be fine. Provided you have more men than they have bullets. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is the lackluster interest system. Basically, if you have an interest in a region, you can do things in that region. The problem is that the system is completely binary. Let me show you. I'm the US and I'm attacking Haiti. There are several great powers that own land in the Caribbean who might get nervous about me annexing islands. Out of these powers, who do you think will side against me? It's none of these. It's actually Russia who suddenly decided they don't like the US and need to send 40,000 Russian peasants halfway across the world to die on a Caribbean beach. In this game, countries will join random wars and mobilize hundreds of thousands of people like the fate of their very nation is on the line. There's no differentiation between local and global interests. Great Britain will take over half of China because it can. The US will ignore Mexico and attack random Italian city-states because that's just what it decided to do that day. This results in every war becoming a Great War. In previous entries, Great Wars were special types of war. In Great Wars, war goals were cheaper and cost a third of the normal amount, and the losers had to disarm and pay a huge war reparations to the victors. There's no such system in Victoria 3. World wars will routinely break out over small Indonesian countries and go on for years with no significant change to the status quo. Which brings us to issue number 4. No way to dismantle a country. Over the course of the game, you will in all likelihood get a country that does not fucking like you and wants you to stop existing. You can deal with such troublemakers via the Liberate Country War Goal. Liberate Country War Goals cause the target country to release a certain number of states as an independent country. This can range from a small city-state to half their fucking country. However, sometimes they just don't get the fucking hint and you're out of options, because everything else incurs a large infamy cost which hurts you more than it hurts them. Speaking of hurt, let's talk about the army building. Unlike in Hoi 4, army and construction are not separate queues. If you want an army, you have to build army buildings. Bear with me. In the early to mid-game, you'll be fighting the greatest enemy of all, budget deficits. All your efforts will go towards building more construction sectors so you can build more buildings, so you can get more money to build construction sectors. To enlarge your army, you would have to make a conscious decision to spend time and construction on building something that's going to cost you money. And this is perfectly fine, right up until the moment you see a perfect opportunity to jump someone and then realize you don't have an army. The army composition itself is pretty simplistic. You have 3 units, infantry, artillery, and cavalry. Please direct your attention to this infographic for information pertaining to the subject of army composition. Same with the navy. Got all that? Great, because the Ottomans have just embargoed us and I hear the Bosphorus is lovely this time of year.
You probably could have, like, owed an obligation.
Treaty ports are special types of states that make you money. Treaty ports give you a direct and permanent access to a country's market, allowing you to trade goods at an advantage and without tariffs. The process of deciding whether or not you need a treaty port in a specific country is rather easy. Open the market tab and see what countries you're trading with the most. Is it possible to get this country in your market? If yes, protectorate them. If no, treaty port. That, or check which countries are embargoing you and go to town. Upper Marlborough, to be specific. And no, you can't keep the White House, it's mine now. Now that we have a treaty port, we just have to run down a checklist. Railways? Check. Couple universities for qualifications? Check. 5 ports for the cheap merchant marine? Check. Alright, now we can build as many trade centers as we need. I also recommend slapping down a promote social mobility decree for better education access and greener grass campaign for more people to employ. Also to prevent the Yanks from rebelling if their national fervor gets too high. Guess you just can't stop the national awakening. DLC. Let's talk about DLCs. For those not in the know, Paradox games are notorious for their DLC monetization schemes. It's what enables their games to have such a long development cycle and retain a significant player base. Victoria 3 is a relatively new Paradox title, so it doesn't have a gigantic amount of DLCs as some of the other titles, but still the price can be a bit intimidating. It goes on sale often, like recently where you could get all the DLCs for €70, so I recommend waiting until then. Let's wrap this up. Victoria 3 is a very ambitious game. It has so many systems and variables working in tandem to simulate, well, everything. It's kind of impressive, honestly. However, there are a couple of major gripes I have with the game. Number 1, the pressure to constantly be at war. Infamy is a resource. You always must have some, else you're wasting it. Even if you don't really care or have the ability to project power outside of your immediate area of influence, you're still heavily incentivized to conquer or protect very small countries. Nobody's forcing you, but it feels like leaving money on the table. Number 2, role-playing being suboptimal. Most games end up looking the same. The same laws, the same colonies, same companies, etc, etc. Like, sure, you could try to be in line absolutist, but then you have a harder time getting a government with good laws and it locks you out of women's suffrage. Same things with overseas colonies. Yeah, you're playing as Japan, and it makes sense for you to conquer the East Indies, but you could just colonize Africa for free. Most of this stems from just not being able to influence your politics in any meaningful capacity. Interest groups never change their interests, landowners will always want serfdom no matter what century it is. Number 3, no real empire building. In Civilization 4, you feel like you're building an empire. You have to sell cities to claim land, then you have to build roads to connect those cities, then you have to construct buildings to utilize the population of cities, and of course you must build and spread out army units to protect your land. If you're not careful, you can overextend and bankrupt yourself because you build too many cities too far away or you have too many units. Or both. In Victoria 3, there are no such systems. Armies can be easily transported to where they're needed, there is no upkeep cost to having possessions on the other side of the globe, and no logistical challenges. Number 4, performance. The performance in this game gets worse the longer you play, hence why few people ever play the end date. It's the only game that I know that punishes you for playing it well. More pops, more buildings, more constructions equals less performance. There have been many performance updates, and every update manages to keep the performance more or less on that level, despite new and more complex systems being introduced, but you still need a beefy PC to play the game normally. Overall though, the game's in a very good spot right now, there's a lot to experience, if map games are your thing. The game often has free weekends, so if you're interested in giving it a go, I keep an eye out for that. In addition, a new update has just been announced that aims to fix at least one of the issues I mentioned, amongst other things. That's all for today. Next time we'll be talking about the British, the colonies, and the fur trade. Thanks for watching.
And if you enjoyed this video, please consider like, comment, and subscribe.